Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the government's chief whip, Julian Smith, is facing calls for his resignation over whether he forced a member of the cabinet to break a traditional pairing agreement in the Commons to get an advantage in a vote. On Tuesday's knife-edge Brexit vote in the Commons, Conservative Party chairman Brandon Lewis was paired with the Liberal Democrat MP Jo Swinson, who's away after having a baby. But Mr Lewis breached the deal and voted anyway, helping the government to win that crucial division. Yesterday, Theresa May told the Commons that it had just been a mistake. But today, MPs have made further allegations that Mr Smith plotted to break the pairing arrangements.
It appears the government chief whip did instruct Conservative MPs to break their pairs. Given this, how can we compel the chief whip to come to the dispatch box to account for his actions? Because if the trust of the pairing system has been abused in this way, he must surely now resign.
Well, today, the leader of the House of Commons, Andrea Leadsom, set out plans to combat harassment and bullying in Parliament. I asked her about the pairing allegations, but first asked her about her new scheme to change the culture in Westminster and if it was actually a move for greater secrecy.
No, we've actually voted for true culture change. I mean, this is going to change the way we manage our life here in Parliament. It's going to be so radically different. There's about 15,000 people who work here, and in the past there's been so little opportunity for any justice to be done in terms of wrongdoing, no matter who it's between. And what we voted for today is something that is truly groundbreaking. There is no parliament around the world that has introduced a new procedure like this to deal with bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct, and so I'm just so proud that we've done this.
Do you feel that you have sometimes been treated like a second-class citizen in the Commons?
I mean, you know, people ask me, isn't Parliament a dreadful place? And I always say to them, I was 25 years in banking, that was much worse. So, in fact, I feel in Parliament people do try and treat each other with respect.
Parliament's attitude towards women cannot have been helped by the row over pairing. A Lib Dem MP on maternity leave, betrayed by one of your cabinet colleagues. You've been assured that this was an honest mistake, but do you believe that assurance?
So first of all, I have to say Jo Swinson is a great person. She's a Lib Dem MP in Concerned, who's just had a baby. I was deeply disappointed when the first I saw of this was on Twitter, and I immediately went to carry out my own investigation into what had happened. I am absolutely assured that Brandon Lewis, who was the pair at the time, was not aware that he was breaking a pair with Jo Swinson.
But does that really stack up? Because it was only on the two most contentious votes that he broke the pair.
So, as I say, I have been absolutely assured, and I'm confident that that was a mistake. The point that's been made is that Brandon wasn't aware that he was paired with Jo Swinson. He was not aware of that. So, and it was a genuine error.
Do you believe that?
Well, you know, this is what I'm told, and I have no reason not to believe it.
Because I've spoken to MPs who tell me that they were asked to break the pair and go ahead and vote because it was such a desperate situation.
What I'm saying is I have the greatest regard for Jo Swinson, and I'm absolutely assured that Brandon Lewis did not know that he was paired with her, and he did not know that he was breaking a pair.
From what we're being told by MPs who were told by the chief whip to break the pair, it looks not just like desperation but deceit. If it is confirmed that the chief whip told MPs to break the pair and therefore he misled the Prime Minister, yourself, and you then misled the Commons, should he resign?
I was told that the breaking of that pair was an error.
An error of judgment or an error?
No, an administrative
error.
A totally administrative error. And as I've just tried to explain, you know, the complexity of trying to manage absences here, there and everywhere, it is quite difficult. There have been, in fact, a number of pairs broken inadvertently and actually by all parties. So, you know, and quite a number by the opposition, but it's not a partisan point. It's merely reflecting the fact that it's a complicated issue.
The only reason all of this has arisen is because of these incredibly tight votes on Brexit. You said of the Chequers plan, "I hate this." That was what was reported straight after it came out. But you backed it nevertheless. Did you sell out, or did Boris Johnson betray Theresa May?
Well, I always, in these issues, look at what I think 17.4 million people signed up to, which was taking back control of our laws, our borders and our money, leaving the single market and the customs union, leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. And so whenever I measure up an offer that we're making to the EU, I look at it in regard to, does it transgress, does it breach those red lines? And in the case of the Chequers Agreement, it doesn't. But
if there are further concessions, as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff said at a meeting, there could be, because the European Commission might force you into that. What are the consequences for you and for the government and for the country if there are further concessions?
Well, I think the key point is that what the Prime Minister's offer is very clever to do is it addresses what the EU has set out as their red lines. So in sticking to mine and the 17.4 million Brexiteers' red lines, but also addressing what the EU has set out as red lines, it forces the EU to come to the table and start properly negotiating with the duty of sincere cooperation that's set out in the treaties.
You have written repeatedly to Cabinet colleagues several times, warning about how much legislation has got to get through on Brexit. I think 4 major bills plus the meaningful vote. You wrote to Cabinet colleagues expressing your concerns about how to do all this, I think 4 weeks ago. How worried are you about getting this through Parliament?
I've had a number of conversations, including with the Prime Minister, about the timing. She and I are completely in agreement that we need to crack on with this, and so we are putting in place steps to make sure that we've got enough time for all the legislation.
Andrea Leadsom talking to me earlier.
Integrity is not normally regarded as the most important qualification to be a good party whip in the House of Commons. Your job is to herd your MPs into voting the right way, using an array of tools that include persuasion, promises, false promises, threats and blackmail. But the Chief Whip, Julian Smith, is in trouble today for a serious breach of good parliamentary practice on Tuesday. In a crucial vote, he told several MPs not to stick to their pairing agreements with other MPs and to vote despite promising not to. Pairing is civilised and simple. 2 opposing MPs both agree to miss a vote. They then don't need to be at the Commons as they cancel each other out. Pairing thus has no effect on the vote's final result. It does mean, though, MPs can do useful things like have babies, get ill or attend ministerial meetings abroad. But if a Commons vote is close, there is a temptation to cheat, to turn up and vote while a pair is absent. Julian Smith, Chief Whip, is widely thought to have taken the view that Tuesday's vote was so important it was worth sacrificing a reputation for. But he said it was an accident, and consequently so did the Prime Minister.
The breaking of the pair was done in error. It wasn't good enough. It will not be repeated.
We're going to need the odds and sods, as many as we can.
In 1976, the Tories accused Labour of cheating on a pairing arrangement, as depicted in James Graham's play This House. It caused disruption in the Commons when Michael Heseltine famously picked up the ceremonial mace in protest. But you can't cheat for long, because then pairing falls apart. Government MPs suffer the most, having to make sure they never miss a vote thereafter. Well, on Tuesday, only one MP, Brandon Lewis, chairman of the Conservative Party, did vote in breach of a pairing agreement. In the aftermath, it was portrayed as a kind of silly mistake. Nick Watt is with me, our political editor. Nick, this is turning into a really quite important argument for the government. So what actually happened here, and what is the government's case?
Well, as you were saying, this is 6:33 on Tuesday night and the crucial Brexit vote. And we can just see that clip that you were playing earlier on. And there you can see Brandon Lewis, the Conservative Party chairman, entering the Commons chamber. And he bumps into a Conservative MP. It's Andrew Stevenson, who is the pairing whip. And Brandon Lewis turns around. Now, why does he do that? Because he's heading to the No lobby to vote against the rebel Customs Union amendment. By doing that, he is then breaking that pairing arrangement with Jo Swinson, who was on maternity leave. And that was the second time in 20 minutes that he broke that. Now, curiously, the only 2 votes that Brandon Lewis turned up for were the 2 closest votes. And that's why people are so suspicious. Now, the explanation was this was an innocent error. That has not washed. So this evening, Conservative Party sources are opening up a bit and they're saying, yes, Julian Smith did decide to break some, but not all of the pairing arrangements. He did ask some Conservative MPs to break. All the ones that he asked refused. They're also saying that, yeah, look, this really was sharp practice, but hey, this was a massively important vote. He was under a lot of pressure, and he's a chief whip without a parliamentary majority. Now, they're saying that this explanation is still absolutely consistent with the fundamental point, which is that an error was made, because his decision was to break the pairing on what they're describing as short-term pairing. So that's, I want to be away because my daughter or son is graduating. I'm in the United States of America. But definitively, he did not want to break the pairing on what they're describing as long-term pairing. So that's the maternity one. They're saying that was a mistake. Interestingly, you talk to other whips, the usual channels, they say short-term pairing, long-term pairing. Never heard that distinction before.
Right. Look, is Julian Smith, both for the explanation he gave and for the, if you like, the original sin, is he in real danger now, do you think?
This evening in Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister is standing by Julian Smith, but don't forget he has delivered the important votes for her. Had that customs union vote been lost, the Prime Minister would be in a very different position. But I have to say, the vitriol that I have picked up from ministers, Conservative backbenchers about Julian Smith is extraordinary. One minister said to me this was disgraceful behaviour, it was disgusting behaviour. A total loyalist said this was deliberate, though how are you going to prove it? And another minister said to me this was despicable behaviour. This goes to the heart of a rotten government.
This is Tories saying
this is a
their
minister.
Own chief whip.
This is a minister saying it is
right.
despicable behaviour, goes to the heart of a rotten government that goes from one crisis to another. Now, will he survive? If it were normal times, he would be out of the door. This is not normal times. This is a government, a minority government, and the Prime Minister at the moment doesn't want him to go, and also summer recess is round the corner.
Nick, thanks. Well, look, I'm joined from Leeds by the Conservative MP, Philip Davis. Thanks for joining us. Do you believe the argument that this was a sort of accidental error?
Well, it was an error. Whether it was accidental or not, obviously, I'm not privy to that. But I think we're getting carried away a bit here. I mean, first of all, actually, it didn't make any difference to the result. It wasn't like 1976 when the Labour broke the pairing system to win a vote by one. It didn't actually make any difference to the result. So I think we're getting slightly carried away.
No, sorry. The argument is not about the vote. The argument is about whether we can trust the government. Well, that is not a sort of trivial matter, is it?
Well, no, it's not. But look, pairing is a convention, absolutely, and it's an important convention. But the idea that this never happens is also not accurate. What you didn't point out in that discussion with Nick Watt was that actually pairings are broken quite regularly. My understanding is that in this Parliament alone, the pairings have been broken over 50 times in this Parliament alone, and the overwhelming majority of those times it was broken by opposition parties. So I appreciate that the BBC and Newsnight in particular are probably gutted that the government won a vote on Brexit, but I think we're getting slightly carried away here over this one particular issue, which yes, it was a mistake, but you know, if everybody was sacked every time somebody made a mistake, there probably wouldn't be many people left at the BBC, to be fair.
I don't understand the use of the word mistake. I mean, the argument is that they deliberately did it, but had not meant to do it to this particular pair. Now, if I murder somebody and I say, oh, look, I murdered the wrong person, I meant to murder that person over there, I wouldn't say, oh, it's a mistake or I'm not guilty. I mean, they've admitted he's guilty. Doesn't he have to resign for that recourse to that technique of breaking pairing agreement?
A mistake was made. We all make mistakes, even at the BBC. I mean, who are you asking should be fired at the BBC for what happened to Cliff Richard?
No, but it was an intentional mistake. With respect, it was intentional to break the pairing agreement. That didn't accidentally say, would you like to break the pairing agreement? It was intentional.
It was intentional to go and invade Cliff Richard's privacy, but I don't see you calling for somebody at the BBC to be fired on the back of it.
Lots of people have called for that.
Well, you haven't. We all made mistakes, and a mistake was made. It didn't affect the result. These pairing arrangements are broken on a regular basis for one reason or another.
Often accidentally.
Maybe, but they're broken. It's not as quite as high and mighty a principle as you're making it out to be. An apology's been made, and that's the end of it. I think really what the big factor is here, I think we've got the Lib Dem chief whip who's embarrassed at the fact that Vince Cable and Tim Farron couldn't be bothered to turn up for a vote the other night, which the government narrowly won, and he's trying to divert attention desperately away from that, and you've sort of fallen into that kind of agenda.
As Nick Watt reported, that is clearly not the view of many on your side. Look, I want to ask you about Brandon Lewis's defence. So he admitted he'd broken the pairing agreement, and he said to Joe Swinson, "I think it was an honest mistake made by the whips." Now, do you think, given that we now know that he was told to break his pairing agreement and accordingly did that, they didn't know his pairing agreement was a maternity one, but he was told to break the pairing agreement. Do you think what he said, "I think it was an honest mistake," do you think that was a full and open account of what had actually happened, or do you think it would have been useful to say, "Oh, by the way, the whips told me to break my pairing agreement"?
Well, it was, like I said, I'm not privy to the conversations that took place, so I can't really speculate or comment on that. A mistake was made. Whether it was an inadvertent mistake, whether it was a mistake that was done in the heat of the battle, I don't know. But a mistake was made, an apology's been made. It didn't make any difference to the result. It's not the only time a pairing arrangement has been breached. And it seems to me that we're sort of getting very excitable over something that actually, at the end of the day, didn't make any difference to the result anyway.
I'm just going to quote something back at you. You only wrote it today. "Politics is all about trust, and once it's lost, it's impossible to win back. We're entitled to hold a government to high standards of integrity, and you can't say they have met those standards this week."
You might appreciate that I'm not necessarily in the Chief Whip's good books, or I've got I have my differences with the Chief Whip, but all I can say from my own personal experience, and I think people know that I say it as it is, I don't hold back when I've got something to say. In my experience of dealing with the Chief Whip, he's always been completely honourable, decent. I've never questioned his integrity once. A mistake's been made on this occasion, and he's apologised for it. I'm prepared to accept his apology. I don't see why anybody else shouldn't. I think this is a diversion tactic from the Lib Dems, because Vince Cable and Tim Farron couldn't be bothered to turn up for a vote earlier in the week.
Philip Davis, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks.